would like to introduce our presenter. Kathy Kobayashi is a third-generation Japanese-American from Texas who has lived in Southern California for 35 years. As a historical consultant, she has worked with various projects, and her favorite has been the Shades of LA. She worked on Shades and other projects with Carolyn Kozo Cole at the Los Angeles Public Library Photo Collection, and they co-authored the book Shades of LA, Pictures from Ethnic Family Albums. She also worked on the statewide Shades of California project, and she has been and is still on the board of Photo Friends. Earlier, she was an undergraduate at Rice University, a Thomas J. Watson Fellow in Europe and East Africa, which I didn't know. I found that out this morning when you sent this to me, so I have to talk to you about that, and a graduate student at Johns Hopkins University studying American social history for a master's degree. So just briefly, when I was in library school, I interned in the photo collection under Carolyn Cole, never dreaming that I would one day take it over. So Carolyn gave me my first big break in the world of library science, and this coming May, it is shockingly going to be 5 years since Carolyn retired, and I was given the reins of the photo collection. And when Carolyn retired, the Photo Friends board, many people decided that it was time for them to step down, which I was fine with and I fully expected. And Kathy was one who said she was going to step down, and she stayed. And when she stayed, to me, that was my validation that I was doing an okay job. So thank you for sticking around, Kathy. I appreciate it. And now I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Christina, for that introduction, and thank you all for coming today for the Shades of LA, the remarkable photos copied from the diversity of LA's family albums, which are here in the LA Public Library's photo collection. I especially want to warmly welcome and thank those who participated in the Shades of LA project 20 or so years ago. And so actually, please wave if you were, in fact, a part of a family that donated to the Shades of LA in any kind of way. I know that there's some donors out there. Anyway, thank you so much. And also, there are people here who helped with the collecting, may not have been donors, but helped with the collecting too, and I want to thank you as well. Thanks also to those who have used and supported the Shades collection over the years. I'm not going to get into thanking individuals right now. That would take much too long. There were so many people involved. But I'll be recognizing a few key people along the way as I speak. I also want to welcome those of you who don't know so much about Shades already and came to find out more. You're really one of the main reasons we decided to do this program, to spread the word. The heart of the program today are really the photos themselves, and I'll try to get to them as soon as I can. The flyer here is just meant to be a teaser and a kind of backdrop for now. It's part of the outreach to the Asian American phase of the project. But first, I feel like I need to really introduce Shades and give an overview. And really, my focus is simple in the end. I want to tell you why I love the Shades of LA, and I want you to come to love it too. Not just in the quaint, nostalgic, sentimental ways we often see old photos, but as compelling images that make us see differently, not only Los Angeles history and Los Angeles today, but also our own family histories and who we are. It may sound a little strange to love an archive, but by the end of my talk, I hope you will, or at least I hope you'll be curious and want to know more. Shades of LA began as a small project in 1991, hoping to find and copy a few hundred photos from the family albums of LA's African American community, and it ended up collecting and copying 10,000 photographs from diverse family albums from across LA, all for the photo collection at the LA Public Library. And it's important that they were collected for one of the great public libraries in the country, not for a restricted private institution. They are widely accessible online through the website lapl.org, and they are used by all kinds of people from all over, from scholars to school children, from filmmakers to people who simply are intrigued by LA. For instance, the films Devil in a Blue Dress from Walter Mosley's novel and My Family, Mi Familia with Edgar James Olmos use Shades photos as inspiration to keep the look of their LA settings authentic. In fact, one of our donors even got a credit in Mi Familia. What is striking about the Shades photos is that they show the history of Los Angeles, a microcosm of American history, from a perspective that's different from the usual views. It includes photos of groups not often seen in the historical record, a wide range of ethnic communities. But even more striking, I think, the photos show these communities from a different perspective, from inside the communities and the families. Too often we only see the views of journalists or TV news crews, crime scenes, the views of outsiders with their own agendas, sometimes even taken from helicopters, which is really an outside view. But these photos are from people's family albums, personal, intimate, the views of insiders, the ways people want to remember their own families and communities. They are accessible, easy to relate to, but the more you look at them, they are also richly complex and layered. See, for example, this photo of Verna Deckard and Arthur Lewis at a beach in Santa Monica in August 1924, a few weeks before they married. It's a wonderful shot of a young couple in love at the ocean, and it's easy to think, to relate to it, to think, that could have been me, or I wish that could have been me. But it's more complex than that. They are in the segregated section of the beach, known as the Inkwell, next to the Casa del Mar, part of a complicated history which many people don't know so much about, and which was very rarely seen before Shades. And no wonder that the usual Chamber of Commerce and LA Times photos of the beach only showed white people. Those photographers only went to the white beaches. I don't have time now to delve into the layers of this photo, but if you want to delve yourself, you can go to the Shades Oral History with Verna Williams on the LAPL website, read a summary, and actually hear the full interview with her. The idea for the Shades project dates back to 1990, when Carolyn Kozo Cole became curator of the photo collection at the LA Public Library. More than 2 million photos, but very few of ethnic LA. Carolyn was frustrated about what was missing, and the last straw came when the Southern California Library in South LA asked her for a historical photographs of Watts for an exhibit on the 25th anniversary of the 1965 uprising. All she found in the Watts folder was a photo of the Pacific Electric Railway Station. She knew that other public archives had the same problem, so she decided that the photos must be out there in private collections, in family albums, or framed and displayed in homes or in shoeboxes. So this, I think we look pretty good, Carolyn. This is from the 1990s, Carolyn and me with some of the Shades photos. So this was the start of the Shades project. And once Carolyn had the vision of finding these family photographs, she pursued it with passion, warmth, and persistence. Many people have been involved in the pursuit over the years, but it was Carolyn's vision that formed the heart of the Shades of LA from the very beginning. She retired more than 4 years ago and moved last year to be near her wonderful children and their families in San Diego. But the Shades of LA archive continues to reflect her vision, her spirit, and her love of Los Angeles and the diversity of its people. We're so happy that Carolyn and her daughter Justine have come to LA to be with us today. Thanks, Carolyn. As Carolyn started making her vision into reality, she turned to Photo Friends, the nonprofit support group for the photo collection, which she had recently founded to sponsor the project. And she got me involved as project historian and Amy Kitchener, a folklorist, to be project coordinator. Later, Judith Hopkins and Sojin Kim became our coordinators. It was a wonderful team we had. Let's see. What we did turned out to be a big grassroots community history project. We organized photo days and asked people to bring in their photos. Outreach was really key. The flyer that was showing before was just part of a very complicated effort. That flyer had 4 languages actually on the back, and we had multiple flyers throughout the community. Then at the photo days, such as the one pictured here at the Japanese American Cultural and Community Center, each donor worked with a team of 2 or 3 interns or volunteers who interviewed them, screened their photos, selecting one to be copied, and recording information about each photo. Usually we had 5 or 6 donor tables going on through the process at one time, each team at a different table. So photo days were lively, exciting events. Here's another photo day, not only with a donor and a Shades team, but also several onlookers. That, in fact, was part of the fun and excitement. Everyone interested in everyone else's photos and stories, not just their own. Finally, 2 professional photographers, Bob Douglas and Coleman Grimmett, copied the photos while the donors waited. This is a wonderful photo of Bob and Coleman working with Pentax 6x7 medium format cameras on big copy stands, producing large, high-quality negatives for the copy shots. If we were doing the project today, of course, we'd be scanning the photos and taking notes with laptops or iPads. But back in the early 90s, scanning and laptops were primitive. So our project was old school, using film cameras and taking notes with pencil and paper. Yeah, give some applause for the old school. So, of course, when we had our first photo day in October 1991, we didn't know what to expect. It was at the Vernon Branch Library on South Central Avenue at 45th Street, and it turned out to be a great day with wonderful photos from the neighborhood, especially the old, long-gone Central Avenue nightclubs. Here's one of those great photos. A parade in front of the Club Alabama, taken in the early 1950s, just a few blocks from our photo day location, when Central Avenue was still a busy street of African American businesses and jazz nightclubs, so different from today. At that point, we had only a small grant from Security Pacific for a few days of collecting. But fortunately, the LA Times covered the project and caught the attention of Robert Danziger, President and CEO of Sunlaw Cogeneration Partners I, an alternative energy firm located in nearby Vernon. Bob was, and still is, deeply committed to community history. And his help to the Shades of LA, both his financial resources and his moral support, were key in expanding the project over the years. I remember when his assistant first came to meet with Carolyn and me, and we were earnestly pitching the idea of the project to her, and she said, "No, you don't understand. You don't need to convince us to support Shades of LA. We just want you to tell us what you need." Over the years, Photo Friends also received support for the Shades project from the Parsons Foundation, the Haynes Foundation, and the California Council for the Humanities. We are certainly grateful for all of these contributions, but we should also recognize that our most generous donor by far was Bob Danziger, and we are especially honored that he has made a special trip from his home in Carmel to be with us today. Give a wave, Bob. Bob's in the back. Thanks so much. Thanks so much. So with Bob's help, in the first phase of the project, from 1991 to 93, we collected images from the larger, older ethnic communities of Los Angeles, not only African Americans, but also Mexican Americans, Asian Americans, and urban American Indians. It was an exciting time, but also hard. The Central Library building was still closed for renovations after the fire of 1986, and shortly after copying photos in the African American community, the upheaval after the Rodney King trial hit in 1992. But the Shades Project continued to copy remarkable images, and when the newly renovated Central Library, this library, opened 20 years ago, the first Shades of LA exhibit was in its new galleries. These are also the photos represented in the book Shades of LA, which came out a few years later. And here's one of those images, a beautiful photo of the wedding of John and Helen Cummins in 1920 in the groom's front yard on 111th Street in Watts. It's family and community, it's the home and the street, all bathed in a lovely light. And it's exactly the kind of photo of Watts we didn't have in 1990, before Shades began. In our second phase, we expanded to include a greater variety of groups and more recent immigrants, with a focus on Jews, Armenians, and Middle Easterners, including Arabs, Israelis, Turks, and Iranians. You may notice in this list some difficult relationships. Armenians and Turks, Arabs and Israelis, and other Jews. And just among those from Iran, there were Muslims, Jews, Baha'i, Armenians, and Kurds. Sometimes people weren't sure they wanted their photos in the same exhibit or on the same shelf with photos from some other group. But Shades managed to thrive by making it clear we were not trying to resolve international controversies, but instead, we're focusing on our shared interest in broadening the scope of LA history. And in the end, not only did we find that the photos could coexist, but potential adversaries turned out volunteering for each other's photo days. Then, in the third phase of the project, we did our final big push to collect photos for Shades of LA, targeting more recent immigrants from Asia, Latin America, and Africa, and families of European ancestry, people of mixed race and ethnicity, people who didn't identify with any ethnic group, and people who had missed our earlier photo days. By 1997, 7 years since its beginning, the Shades of LA project had collected 10,000 images for the photo collection at the LA Public Library, and more than 1,000 people had worked as donors and volunteers. By then, Shades had become a kind of franchise, with the project, the permanent archive, the book, 12 oral history interviews, and numerous exhibits. Others became interested in doing their own Shades project, and in fact, one of the best parts of Shades is that it's a model that can be replicated almost anywhere. We developed a manual explaining how to do it, and we even have copies here if you'd like one. You'd have to update the technology if you want to do your own Shades project now, but the basic ideas, I think, live on. Then, in the late 1990s, the LA Public Library and the California State Library created the Shades of California project to extend the Shades model to 24 public libraries around the state. The Shades of California book came out in 2001, edited by Kimmy Kodani Hill. And in 2003, Huell Hauser made an hour-long special, Shades of California, which still pops up occasionally on KCET. Whoops. Oh no, there it goes. This is the photo used on the Shades of California book, a brother and sister dancing at a christening party in the backyard of a Filipino-American family in Wilmington in the late 1950s. A wonderful photo which manages to capture the dancing and the whole scene. And I think the donor for this photograph may be here today. I got an email from Florante. Ah, there you are. Ibanez. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So Shades of LA has produced results far beyond what we had imagined more than 20 years ago. But the part I think I am most pleased about is the way it's involved a wide range of people in the making of history. People respond to Shades, I think, because they are the active heart of the project, not passive, not just the audience, not even just the passive subjects to be studied and written about. Instead, we see the people with the photos as the active carriers of history, as the history makers. In family albums and photos, we see people as the creators, the curators of their own family histories, deciding what to take photos of in the first place, deciding which of those photos to save and which to display, deciding which stories to tell about the photos, deciding what they want to keep telling and passing down the generations. We see people defining their own history, what people think is important about their own lives, and we support people in this history making. And this, I think, is what makes the Shades photographs not just interesting, but even powerful. I could tell you so much more about the Shades of LA. It's really been a wonderful experience. Carolyn and I both agree it's one of the best things we ever did. But I should get on to the rest of the photos. And if you could please save your questions or comments till the end, unless you just can't contain yourself. Especially if you or your family is in one of the photographs, shout out. But otherwise, we'll try to just get through the photos at this point. We were interested in documenting the story of our donors' immigration and then migration to Southern California. Some photos show where people came from. These are revolutionaries in Mexico in about 1910. Julio Rodriguez is in the center. And the important detail to notice here, I think, is that he's holding a camera. So that means that there were at least 2 cameras there. And I think the moral to the story is, don't go to the revolution without your camera. Some photos show the process of immigration. Here, Hisataro and Sugi Kiriyama with their first son in Japan in 1907, a beautiful family portrait in the old country. And notice the details, the faces, the expressions, the clothing. Here are Hisataro and Sugi Kiriyama, the same couple, with their children in Los Angeles in 1929. So they've changed over the years, not only 20 years older, but their clothes, especially Sugi's, have changed from traditional Japanese to more modern American. The other striking detail, I think, is the big gap in age between their oldest son, the one from the first photo, and his younger siblings. And in fact, that's a reflection of the story of their immigration. Hisataro moved to the United States in 1908 for economic reasons, and Sugi followed in 1914. So there was a 6-year gap before they were reunited as a family in Los Angeles. And here's the final photo in the series. This is the same mother, Sugi Kiriyama, at 101 years old in 1990, with her son, George. She's back in a kimono, but she doesn't look very traditionally Japanese to me, especially with her big, open smile, and George's too. And George Kiriyama, by the way, was an important educator and member of the LA Unified School District Board, and also one of the mainstays of the Japanese American Historical Society of Southern California, with his wife, Iku. This is a medical entry certificate for Silvestre Morales coming into the U.S. from the Philippines in June of 1928, another aspect of the immigration process. I think the date is especially significant here, only a few years after the very restrictive immigration law of 1924, which cut off most immigrants, especially from Asia, but still allowed those from the Philippines, which was a U.S. territory. Silvestre's son, Royal Morales, became a leader in the Filipino-American community in LA. This was taken at the International Institute of Los Angeles, founded in 1914, and one of the earliest organizations assisting the many different immigrant groups throughout the 20th century, which first settled in Boyle Heights on arriving in LA. Here, Korean immigrant women are learning English in 1922, with childcare provided. And coincidentally, one of the words we can read on the blackboard over to the right is the word forget. We asked families why they left home and came to the U.S. Many left for economic reasons or to join other family members, and some of the stories were more complicated. A French oil tanker rescues Vietnamese refugees called boat people in the South China Sea on July 25, 1979. The tanker was en route from Indonesia to Japan, and Thuet Thi Tran, 9 months pregnant, was the first person to climb up to the ship. And we heard the story. Her then husband told the people on the boat, "Take your time, don't get too excited. The boat could sink if we don't keep it balanced." It's a great story and also a beautiful photograph. Here, Diroi and Aram Avedian celebrate their 50th anniversary at their son's home in Glendale in 1982. At first, this seems like a simple photograph, an older couple sitting on a sofa. But then you might notice the unusual marks on her face. Duroi's family was killed in the Armenian genocide in 1915, and she was adopted by Bedouins in the Syrian desert who tattooed her face to hide her Armenian identity. She later escaped to Aleppo, Syria, where she met and married Aram. That's what I mean about the layers of the photographs that are so rich. Others migrated to Los Angeles from other parts of the United States, especially the Midwest. Melinda Blackway with her mother Grace in LA on 21st Street, 1950. Grace's father moved his family to LA from Kansas when she was 8 years old in order to pursue his career as a chiropractor. And Grace's husband, Melinda's father, moved to LA from Wisconsin. And once here, people found work. Some worked for the railroads. Here, Charles McKinney and Frank Carter, African-American waiters for the Southern Pacific, at the old Central Station at 5th and Central in LA in the late 1930s. A really beautiful photograph, I think, and one of my favorites. Others opened their own small businesses. Here, Chinese herb store owner Yik Hong Chung with his two sons, Elbert and Sam, at 4925 South Broadway in 1938. I think actually my favorite part of this photograph are the names. The father's name, Yik Hong Chung, and the son's names, Elbert and Sam. Here's another small business. Owner Joseph Lagomarsino to the left at the Union Bar at 3rd and Central in about 1910. His parents left Genoa, Italy to go to Sutter's Creek during the gold rush in the late 1840s. In 1867, they came to LA by stagecoach with their baby, Joe. And here, an interior view of Aquila Drugs Company at 7th Street and Broadway in Los Angeles in the 1920s. At first, this seems to be just another small business, but there's another story here as well. That's actually Joseph Lagomarsino again at the left. And he opened this drugstore when his bar, the one we saw previously, was closed by Prohibition in the 1920s. Brothers John and Paul Bazagian with John's two sons in a print shop and a garage on 9th Avenue in 1936. Their Beaux-Arts Press was the first Armenian English print shop in Los Angeles. And I especially like the picture of FDR in the back. Others worked the land. Here, Filipino citrus workers in the back of a truck after work in the San Fernando Valley in the early 1930s. And you can see the ladders, the key for citrus workers, in the back of the truck. Some worked in canneries. Jenny Gonzalez at the top with fellow workers in the LA Harbor area in the 1930s. Others served in the armed forces. Korean American and Chinese American reserves in California during World War II, April 26, 1942. This date is especially significant, April 1942, just when the Japanese Americans throughout the West Coast were being evacuated and interned. So this was a particularly good time for Korean and Chinese Americans to clearly distinguish themselves from Japanese Americans. And here's Susan Ahn, later Cuddy, outside her family's home near 37th Place in Los Angeles. She was the first Korean American in the Waves, the women's division of the U.S. Naval Reserves in the 1940s. She also went to the Pensacola Gunnery School to become the first woman gunnery officer. That's already a good story, but there's even more. Susan's father was Dosan An Chang-ho, a key leader in the Korean independence movement in the early 20th century, a major figure commemorated at the interchange of the 10 and 110 freeways. So when you see the sign now, and there's the sign for the interchange, you can think of this photo. Many did industrial work. American Indians Joe Tafoya and Al Little working in the aircraft industry in LA, assembling aircraft parts in 1956. And some organized for better working conditions. Here, Rosie Albron left age 19 and Ramona Fonseca age 17, protesting against the Barenvelt Shirt Company in 1943. We saw the importance of social organizations in the communities. A gathering of the El Recuerdo Club in the 1920s, a social club which performed Spanish dancing at the Lugo Adobe at Rancho San Antonio, now the site of Bell Gardens. This may have been partly social tradition, partly romanticization of the Spanish past. an order of Ladies Elks at Clifton's Pacific Seas cafeteria in about 1945. One of the many shades photographs showing vibrant African American social organizations in LA in the early 20th century. And a good picture of Clifton's, too. Here, the International Workers' Order and the Jewish People's Fraternal Order food collection for families of striking workers in LA in 1948. Abraham Maimonides, standing in front of the door, was the executive secretary of the Jewish People's Fraternal Order. And I couldn't resist one more photo from this leftist fraternal benefit society. International Workers' Order Knitting Circle Luncheon in Los Angeles, November 12, 1941. A room packed with leftist women knitting for the soldiers a few weeks before Pearl Harbor. Myrna Pineda came from Guatemala to prepare traditional food for the Guatemalan Festival during the 1991 LA Marathon. And at New Horizon, an Islamic school in Pasadena, religious studies teacher Iman Hassem with her students in about 1994. It was also important to capture the leisure and recreation of the families. Gretchen Hinckley Kramer with her mother, Clara Dean Hinckley, on the Venice Canal in 1907, completed by Abbott Kinney the year before. So you see the gondolier in the back. Clara's ancestors came to America on the Mayflower. The Arcienegas at Ocean Park in 1925. I especially like the mother on the end. She had 7 daughters, and she looks to me a little worried. And here's a different photo of the Central Avenue Club scene. I showed you the earlier photo outside the Club Alabama, and here's a different take. We actually rarely copied anything that wasn't a photograph, but this was an exception. It's an ad for the new Club Alabama, a nightclub at 42nd and Central Avenue in Los Angeles in 1941. And if you can read the print, it says, "Finest Harlem Cafe in America." Better than Harlem, I guess. And promotes 2 shows nightly with your genial host, Curtis Mosby. The Filipino Recreational Hall at 245 South Main Street in Los Angeles in the early 1940s. The owner, Vincent Noble, is to the right. I think this is a really beautiful photograph and a kind of an interesting perspective on the whole pool hall. This is a favorite. And here's a souvenir shot taken in Tijuana in 1976, especially the hats. Kid Tequila, Cisco Kid, and I think actually that's a mule painted to look like a zebra. I'm pretty sure that seems to be a motif. There's a whole series of these kinds of photographs. Here, a Japanese-American family and friends from Pasadena gather beside an automobile at Wawona Tree in Yosemite National Park in about 1935. The donor, Sophie Tajima Toriumi, is in the middle. And she and her family were real leaders in the Pasadena Japanese-American community. A portrait of a band, the California Joys Orchestra with their instruments, Italian-Americans from Cypress Park in about 1928. So this is for my friend who's a saxophone player. Actually, I have a couple of friends who are saxophone players. Here, Peel Kwan Kim is playing the drums for dancers in Woon Ha and Louise Parks' backyard in Inglewood in about 1950. I love it when the Shades photographs, these still photographs, capture dance. And here's another. Giselle Chagouri and her friends dancing the Dabke, the Lebanese national dance, in 1989. We also see people celebrating holidays, a common theme, as you would expect, in all family albums. Christmas in 1930 with the Nagano family, at their home on West 30th Street in Los Angeles. I love the carefully composed mixture of Japanese storybooks with Mother Goose, Japanese and Western clothing. And Momo Nagano, the little girl in the kimono, actually became a very well-known artist in the community, and her son is Dan Kwong, the performance artist, if any of you know him. Luis Lucero and his parents during Christmas in about 1945. The focus, of course, is the gun, the toy gun. But the other details are good too. The Christmas cards on the wall, the magazines, the bronzed baby booty. Here, a mother lights the third candle of Hanukkah with her three daughters, Susan, Karen, and Diana, at their home in Pacoima in 1960. And this is Parviz Garib Afshar taking a ceremonial leap to celebrate the end of the Persian year in San Francisco in 1960. Now, I do realize that San Francisco is not in Southern California, but the family was partly in LA, and besides, it's such a great photo that we just couldn't resist it. We had all these kind of criteria and guidelines, but just sometimes you just had to copy the photo anyway. And here, 6-year-olds Diane Funada and her best friend Naomi Okamoto dressed for Easter in LA, April 1956. This photo has become a wonderful symbol for the whole Shades of LA, and we're so glad, at least I think, that Cheryl Funada, Diane's sister, is here today. Cheryl, are you here? No. I don't see you. I thought she was going to be here. Diane unfortunately passed away a number of years ago, and we hope that the joy her picture has brought to so many serves as a tribute to her memory. Another Easter shot, children on an Easter egg hunt at the Korean Methodist Church in 1943 on 29th Street near USC. A lovely kind of spontaneous image. And finally, I have one more Easter shot, which I just had to include, even though some of you might find this a little frightening. Whoops. Tony, at age 3, and a portrait with the Easter Bunny taken at Eagle Rock Plaza in 1987. He's so happy. He's so happy. 3 generations of the Ornstein family celebrating the Passover Seder in 1961 in the Pico Robertson neighborhood. It's a great family gathering, from the young man in the back, sort of showing off, to the grandmother in the front. The 4th of July celebration at the International Institute of Los Angeles in 1923. This is the same place in Boyle Heights where Korean women were studying English in an earlier photo. And the International Institute actually still works with immigrant populations. They've actually moved now to Lincoln Heights, but it's the same organization for almost 100 years. And here, one of my favorites, Aiko and Isamu Kuromi in Halloween masks in 1925 at their home at the family flower nursery, Flower View Gardens on Los Feliz Boulevard. This is such a beautiful photo. One of those rare snapshots that is also fine art. And finally, the holiday we're all getting ready for. Coming up very soon, Thanksgiving. Here, Mary Ann Dannon with friends having Thanksgiving dinner in Venice in 1975. I realize this isn't the iconic Thanksgiving shot with the turkey in the middle, but I like the way it's composed, yet casual. We see all families celebrating rites of passage as well, although the particular ceremonies may vary. This is a scrapbook page commemorating an engagement party for Helen and William Brown, held on West Durardi Road in Arcadia in 1941. Sometimes we just had to copy the whole page instead of the individual photos. Helen Brown, by the way, was a leader in the Filipino-American community in Los Angeles, and William was of European ancestry. Here, men in tuxedos prepare to make an entrance at a wedding reception held in the backyard of an East LA residence in 1944. Television producer Pete Rodriguez is second from the right. Here, George and Dikranui Kirazian in front of the St. James Armenian Apostolic Church on their wedding day, June 24th, 1962. And the Arcinega sisters at the wedding of Henrietta Arcinega, the second from the left, and Edward Turbay in Boyle Heights, September 4th, 1931. Such a beautiful Boyle Heights family. And actually the same as the family on the beach with the mother on the side in black. So now you can see why she was really vigilant. Also, this is the same family that was involved in the film, Mi Familia, and got a credit on that film. And this is a companion shot from the Shades of LA exhibit in 1993 when the newly renovated Central Library reopened. Here, the bride, Henrietta, stands in front of the photo from her wedding day in the exhibit. And actually, when the book came out, she would sign your book, The Bride. And here's one of the few Shades photos which has no people. 7 grains and chili pepper, which are thrown in 4 directions in a sabua naming ceremony. Hope I'm saying that right. An Egyptian ritual for good health and balance. There. And these are the parents and their daughter at the Sabua Egyptian naming ceremony, the child's official introduction to society in about 1994. Jahan Agrama at right, her life partner Dawara, and their daughter Anjum. Her name means stars in Arabic. It's an interesting ceremony. Different cultures have different kinds of naming or baby ceremonies, and it's new to most people. But it's also interesting that this is a lesbian couple. Not that many families pointed out gay and lesbian family members, but this was also 20 years ago, and I wonder if we were doing Shades today, whether that might be different. Here, a studio portrait of Edna Murata wearing her communion dress and Giorgia Faso in about 1915, an Italian-American family. Striking the piñata at Lulu Moreno's birthday party in 1956. Leopoldus' daughter, Lulu, in a piñata game at her birthday celebration. This image reminds us how much some ethnic traditions have become part of the common culture. It's hard to imagine a Southern California kid who hasn't had a piñata at a birthday party at some point. And here, Janie Mamoli poses with her parents, Jackie and Cy Mamoli, on the day of her graduation from St. Anthony High School in Long Beach in 1987. And finally, in the rites of passage. A funeral procession on North Broadway passes in front of Chinatown's East Gate in 1953. I think this is a really beautiful shot. Going through Chinatown, the backdrop, the people walking along, the solemnity, the people on the side. And actually, I showed this and a lot of other slides to a group at the Pasadena Rotary Club at one point. And one of the men was very excited about this photograph and came up to him at the end. And I thought, oh, he's moved. It's just so moving, this funeral. And he came up to me and he said, "What's the make of that car?" So that's another thing about Shades. We can't predict what people are going to relate to, how they're going to be used, and sometimes it surprises us. We saw how family albums captured the daily lives of, I missed one. Actually, this is really important. This is the Foisia family, a Samoan-American family visiting their grandparents' grave at Green Hills Memorial Park in Rancho Palos Verdes in 1986. So this isn't a funeral. This is a cemetery visit years after. And I know different cultures do different things about cemetery. I'm a cemetery visitor, so I particularly relate to this going back. And it's a whole different feel. You can see even in their faces. But I love that we have a record of that as well. We saw how the family albums captured the daily lives of children and teenagers. Arno Bustillos playing in the driveway of his home on Dubonnet Avenue in Rosemead in 1959. This is also one of my favorites. The boy, the driveway, the car, the hose, it just seems so LA to me. And in fact, this was the runner-up for the cover of the Shades of LA book after the two girls. This is 4-year-old Ralph Ahn posing on the photographer's pony at First and Flower Streets in downtown Los Angeles in 1930. It's really a great version of a very common shot. In fact, Carol and I once considered doing a whole exhibit of kids on ponies. Although we were also going to include goat carts, because that was also. This is one of those things I wonder if it'll come back. But this photograph is also interesting because Ralph is Susan Ahn's younger brother, the Wave from earlier, son of Helen Lee and Dosan Ahn Chang-ho, the Korean American leader. So it has this sort of political significance as well. Here, Deborah DeBees, second from the right, with her friends in the Jordan Downs housing project in Watts in 1957. In its early days in the 1940s and 1950s, LA's public housing reflected the progressive ideals of housing reformers and included racially integrated projects. And I think this photograph is particularly poignant because of what happened to Jordan Downs in the long run, especially now that there are plans to tear it down and replace it. Here, Opie Ortiz climbing a tree in 1974. Just a nice casual shot, and also a really good outfit. I thought that was. John and Danny Mojica, brothers with their new Mohawk haircuts in 1958. They cut their hair in support of their team, the Lincoln High School Mohawks. I think actually their mother brought this in. I remember her telling about finding out that they had done this many years before. Frank Lopez in his drapes in San Fernando in 1944, a variation on the zoot suit style widely popular in the 1940s. And teenage girls, Mary Lou Martinez, Mary Puga, and their friends getting ready to go to a party in 1964. When we were first collecting this, my daughter was quite young, 8 or 10 or so, and she saw this photograph and she said, "Oh, are they going to a costume party?" And I said, "No, actually, that's the way we looked," because this is my vintage. Young men, friends sitting on the running board of an automobile on 37th Street in Los Angeles in about 1925. I think this is a great photo. The guys, the car, the running board, the view of the whole street. And it also just happens to be Ralph Bunche on the left, the later winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, the first African American so honored. And here, Alfredo Bedoya and his horse in the San Gabriel Valley in about 1910. I like this photograph because it's so mysterious, and we actually don't know a whole lot about it. It's very early, 1910, and I keep thinking that it should inspire a short story or maybe even a novel, but I haven't found that yet. The family albums also captured the daily lives of adults and the families. Here, a quiet moment. Robert Van Meter sits in an overstuffed chair reading a newspaper in about 1935. I think it's lovely, and it makes me think we need more pictures of people reading. Edgar and Alice Lee in front of her family home with a music book and a trumpet in about 1920. This is such an ethereal image. The couple with the music, the boy in the background to the side. And it's also interesting because it's an interracial couple, a Chinese man and a white woman, very early on, around 1920. And we heard the story of how they had to leave California to marry, I think to Nevada, because of California's anti-miscegenation laws. Here, Henry Pickens and Wattie Bell Rozier Pickens at home with their family maid in 1929. An interesting study in race and class. And also, I think the maid has a really great look on her face. And here's another interesting domestic scene. In a kitchen, cooking, but not in a home. These are Sherman Institute students making fry bread in Riverside in about 1930. During this time, American Indian children were taken from their homes and families to boarding schools so that they would assimilate to mainstream society. It's a difficult history, and Shades copied photos from the Sherman Institute albums. And another domestic scene, Charlene and Glenn Creason beside the family's new television in 1950. So this is a great mother-son shot, a lot of rich background, of course, especially the TV, but it's even better because it's our own esteemed map librarian, Glenn Creason. Yeah, Glenn gets a round of applause. And of course, there are also photos of grandparents with grandchildren. Yoon-Ki Lee and her granddaughter Pamela in 1958. I think this is one we can all relate to. Another seemingly simple domestic scene with many layers. Helena Hoffmanis Wright with her aunt, sewing in her parents' living room, also used as a bedroom and a dining room. She was from Latvia and came to the US under the displaced persons quota from a refugee camp in West Germany in 1950. At the right is a record player that she bought for $30 with money that she earned. Her monthly salary was $120. And on a lighter note, a Jewish family in their backyard in the San Fernando Valley in about 1948. Louis Fader was born in Austria, and his family immigrated to New York City in 1913. In 1923, they moved to Los Angeles and opened a grocery store near downtown. His wife, Helen Chernoff Fader, is seated on the far right. A Filipino-American family gathering with lechon, a roast pig, in 1953. Helen Brown is in the back row center holding a baby, the same Helen Brown from the engagement photos we saw earlier. In the notes, her husband, Bill, is identified as the tall person in the back. He also seems to be one of the only white people in the photograph. As you've seen, we didn't copy much in the way of formal portraits, which are often static and posed, and usually don't show much of the social and historical context. But when something wonderful came up, we grabbed it. Joe Neighbor and Sarah Holquin Neighbor with their daughter, Joanne, in about 1945. Joe was a Yaqui Indian and his wife, a Hopi Navajo. They met and married in New Mexico. Sarah moved to Los Angeles during World War II, and Joe joined her after his honorable discharge from the 15th Cavalry of the U.S. Army. And finally, Marilyn White's family portrait in 1954. This is a wonderful image of a Los Angeles family in their home at 231 West 43rd Street. Marilyn, by the way, the donor, is the smiling girl in the back, and she later won an Olympic silver medal in track and field. But the favorite family story about this photo centers on her little brother, who locked himself up in toy handcuffs a few hours before the photographers arrived and had everyone frantically looking for the key until the photograph just had to be taken with the handcuffs still locked on. I hope these photos have given you a flavor of the Shades of LA. I love going through them, seeing inside LA's families and communities, seeing the variety of our experiences over time, the culturally and historically specific, and also seeing the universal, the common ground we can all relate to. And I love looking at the photos closely, finding the stories behind the photos, and sharing the photos with others. Sometimes I find myself talking about the Shades photos in the same way I talk about my own family photos. In fact, I like to think that not only was the Shades of LA archive drawn from a diverse range of family albums, but that it has itself become LA's family album, one we can all share. If you want to know more about Shades and the photo collection, there are several ways to follow up. You can visit the library's website, lapl.org, click on the photo collection, and search through digitized versions of most of the 10,000 Shades photographs, plus about 80,000 from the broader collection. The website also has links to the 12 Shades oral history interviews and to videos from the LA in Focus series, which this program is a part of. You can sign up for Photo Friends' monthly email newsletters, and if you'd like to earn our eternal gratitude for a nominal fee, you can become a member of Photo Friends, either by stopping by the Photo Friends table in the lobby or going to your website, photofriends.org. We also have a Photo Friends blog, and I'm planning to post the photos from this talk there, a few at a time over the next few months. At least you can pick up one of the great Photo Friends postcards. You can also be a Facebook friend of the photo collection of the LA Public Library and get great photographs from the collection occasionally in your newsfeed. And if you go to the KCET website right now, you can see a great new article about Shades by Linnell George. Highly recommended. Linnell wrote a wonderful article back in the early 90s about Shades of LA, and she got so excited about it, she actually came and volunteered for the project, too. And to be more non-digital, you can look at the Shades of LA book available in the lobby. It came out a while back in 1996 and focuses on the first few years of collecting, but I think it's still very good, and Carolyn and I can sign them for you. And for more, you can look at the Shades of California book as well, edited by Kimmy Kodani Hill. If you're interested in doing the project yourself, you can have a copy of the manual, the nitty-gritty about how to do it, available at the Photo Friends table in the lobby. We hope you've been enjoying the Shades photographs we scattered around the room and the lobby. They're actually from some of our old traveling exhibits, and they're our party favors for today. The captions aren't on the photographs, so it'll be like a scavenger hunt for you to find the caption on the online database. I think we should start out with no more than one photograph per family, and then we'll sort of see how they go. I think there are about 135 of them lying out. Finally, I hope you'll go home and look at your own family photos in a new light, not only as the wonderful personal mementos they are, but as potentially important historical documents and as ways of understanding who we all are. Thank you very much. Thanks. You want to do it? Yeah. I guess it's getting, yeah. Well, we kind of got started late, too. So, sure. So if anybody has questions, we can take some time. We had extra excitement at the beginning of the program. So, Silva Manugian, one of the great donors and volunteers for Shades of LA.
Thank you, Kathy. It's a pleasure to be here, and this was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Oh. Question is, on the Facebook website, are we who are Facebook devotees able to submit photos to you or send photos to you, attach them to our comments?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know. Christina really runs the Facebook page, so.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The question is, on the Facebook site or blog or presence, is it possible for us to attach to our comments photographs that we might have that might be of interest to you?
I think if they're already uploaded to a website, you're more than welcome to attach the link to it, and you can absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, please.
Yeah,
sure.
It's great. I'm not the person to ask. I know how to hit the like button, but so. Anybody else? Questions? Oh, I think I'm supposed to stand up here.
Hi. I have a page on Facebook for Santa Monica, Ocean Park, and Venice. And we have a lot of our members who are posting pictures of their families. Would it be something that you could download from there? Could we make that available to you so you could add it to Shades of LA? I really try to encourage people, pictures of somebody in 1952. Margie here has her mom and sister running along the beach by the old lighthouse.
At this point, I'm trying to process our 3.4 million photos. Maybe when I'm done with that, I'll entertain more Shades photos. But you might want to hit up the Santa Monica Historical Society in their public library. They might be able to add those to their collection. Yeah. So
Right.
now I'm just trying to get through what I have. But I'll entertain it and hit me up in about 20 years. So yeah.
Christine's getting all the questions. Oh, go ahead.
Was there any historical kind of significance that really kind of stuck in your mind as you went through the pictures?
Oh, you mean,
Just something in the history of Los Angeles that maybe you didn't know about or people don't know about that.
oh, I see. Well, it's, there were definitely things that people knew something about, like the Central Avenue clubs or the segregated beaches. I mean, a lot of people didn't know about them, but certainly there were ones of us who sort of knew they existed, but had never really seen them. That certainly happened a lot. And then there are certain things that just became so, just struck home. I think the importance of the Filipino-American immigration to the United States, but also particularly to California, really came home in terms of. So there were things like that came up, but I'm trying to think of something that we absolutely didn't know about before, and I'm not thinking of something. It was more to have that visual element that we had never seen. So. And we did kind of, every time we did a project, we presented, and actually that was part of my role, a kind of an overview of the history of that group so that people knew, sort of things to be looking for and would have a kind of a timeline of the history that they could place so that something like, 1928, that's 4 years after the immigration laws changed, so how did this person get in? Those sorts of things, placing things in historical context.
I think we'll do one more because there's cake out there, so we really want to get to the cake.
Yes. Oh, good. This is my husband.
Yeah, well, all right. So I'm a ringer, I understand. But so obviously the technology has changed, and if you were doing the Shades project starting today, what would be gained, what would be lost in terms
Right.
of dealing with new technologies?
Right. Well, that's a big question. It has been interesting sort of looking back. I mean, it really does seem very old school what we were doing back in the 1990s. Well, certainly there would be things that would be easier. I mean, the scanning would be easier and extremely high quality and that sort of thing. But I have to say, I sort of wonder how it would work, because now you really wouldn't have to necessarily physically get together, right? You don't need those medium format cameras. You can just send them around. But then how do you get the stories? Because a lot of it was someone sitting there and turning the pages and saying, oh, yeah, that was the story, And so I don't know. I'm not saying that you couldn't get the stories, and obviously there's sort of posting and different kinds of conversations that take place. Well, even on Facebook, but it's a different kind of story. So I do think those are kind of a, you gain something, you lose something. The other big change that I would see if we were doing it now is that people would have so many more photographs. I mean, we copied 10,000 photographs. I think some people have 10,000 photographs of each child. Or particularly the first one. So, and also people don't edit photographs the way they used to. I mean, partly the photographs from the 1920s were very edited because, it was hard to take a photograph, and it was expensive, and it was a sort of special, and in fact, those have lasted extremely well because they were done on usually high quality and then on high quality paper. And so some of those are in much better shape than all those photographs we took in the 1960s, for example, with fairly new color film that shifted. So you know, technology, it's not all progress. But anyway, but I do worry about this whole business of editing and what people are doing with photographs and how we're not necessarily making those deliberate decisions about what's most important because we can just have it all. And we don't have to make those decisions. And I do think there's a value in making those decisions because at some point you have so many that you don't access them. And then also the stories, again, don't get passed along within families in the same way. Like I don't know if people sit at computer screens with, you know, the whole family. Some people do. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's really, I think, can be quite challenging. And I'm really excited to know if there's anybody here who wants to jump up and say they're ready to take this on. I can't believe how much work we did looking back on it, Carolyn, and it kind of makes me a little tired just to think of it. But anyway, I do think that there are some interesting possibilities that might be available in the future. Okay, thanks. Yes, and let me say there is cake outside, and also we do need to get out of the auditorium, I think, fairly quickly. Yeah, right. But there's cake outside, coffee, and thank you so much for coming. Thank you.